If everything goes as planned, early next year you will be able to walk into a state-licensed store and buy marijuana grown by a state-licensed grower. So what happens to the big players in the big business of illegal pot, the drug syndicates and dealers who made millions before legalization? With help from border reporter Angela Kocherga, here's a look at some of the changes and challenges ahead on both sides of the law. This is what happens when the Mexican drug cartel's business interests are threatened. People die, tens of thousands in the last half-decade. And now their interests are threatened by new pot laws in this country, by the promise of state-licensed growers and sellers in Colorado and Washington. Legalization supporters say that's a good thing. Here's a former FBI agent during the initiative campaign in Washington state.
Because it allows an opportunity to get the organized crime, the drug cartels out of the drug business.
There's no reason for us to back off.
Lieutenant Mark Brogan heads Washington state's marijuana eradication program.
They're not going to stop.
He and some of his team recently led us to the site of a grow operation they busted last summer.
Right up over that ridge.
They don't expect trouble today. They're just being careful.
In the event there is shots fired, we'd ask that you get down as low as possible and get behind something large, a tree.
A rugged hike in Kittitas County, across water, through deep brush, up a steep scree slope above Monastash Creek. A perfect pot farm hideaway.
All this twine's used to hang the plants and dry it.
For Brogan, what he sees out here, those campaign claims ring hollow.
And these aren't the thickest. The criminal infrastructure to deliver product is already here. It's already in place. So common sense says there's no reason for them to back off.
So even with recreational pot now legal and often smoked openly in violation of the letter of the law, and with medical marijuana dispensaries opening all over the state, the WSP keeps targeting illegal grows. Last year, 130 busts destroyed more than 200,000 pot plants all over eastern Washington.
These are serious criminal drug trafficking organizations.
State and federal drug agents tell us there isn't a lot of Mexican-grown marijuana that makes it this far north.
They come in starter cups, just like if you went to the Home Depot or Lowe's or something. Rows and rows and rows and rows of them.
But those Mexican drug rings don't have to move it this far because they're growing it here already.
As far east as Walla Walla and as far west as Snoqualmie Pass.
And anywhere in between.
And anywhere in between. Anywhere there's outdoor public lands, they're exploiting it.
The steep hillside has been cleared of rocks and roughly terraced for planting. We find the remains of an irrigation system in a nearby stream. The stubs of these mature plants are nearly 2 inches in diameter.
Everywhere that's clear now, that's not a tree, had a 4 to 6 foot marijuana plant on it.
Very few in law enforcement expect the folks who are here to just give up and go away. In fact, they expect them to stay and fight for a place in a very lucrative market. So what does all this mean in the border states and in Mexico, where we've seen so much killing in the drug war? With the view from the border, here's Angela Kocherga.
Allen, I'm in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, and this bustling border city has really benefited from U.S.-Mexican trade, but it's also a hub for drug cartels, and they've clashed violently over a corridor, a smuggling corridor that cuts right through here.
4210 Bravo 217.
Creativity in smuggling marijuana into the U.S. is matched only by the brutality used to defend lucrative routes in Mexico. During the bloody battle to control the border city Juarez, the amount of marijuana from Mexico in this region fell by nearly half. And that opened the door to new competition from U.S. growers.
The majority of this weed is coming from California. A little bit of it's coming from Colorado.
It's competition.
It's competition.
Officers recently arrested 2 people at this home in El Paso on marijuana charges, including a woman who's a soldier at Fort Bliss. Officers say her boyfriend was a dealer selling Kush, a more potent U.S. variety of pot. It costs more and weighs less.
And is it heavy?
No.
Oh, it's not very heavy.
This bundle seized during another bust is known as a baby. It's worth at least $8,000. Here on the border, it's hard to find anyone who expects drug cartels to simply walk away from marijuana profits. The big question now, what kind of fight is looming? University of Texas El Paso professor Howard Campbell is the author of Drug War Zone.
I think that Mexican drug cartels are rational business organizations, even though they're very violent in Mexico. What they will do with the growing legalization in the United States is figure out ways to get their product to the American consumer.
There are signs Mexican cartels are adapting.
We've had one seizure that they've told us that it was Mexican Kush.
Now that the violence has subsided here in Juarez, it's business as usual for marijuana smugglers. But it seems there's a new fight set to begin, an economic battle to win over U.S. consumers. Allen?
Angela, at this point, one of the big questions here is whether federal drug agencies will have to change their tactics in a shifting environment involving legalized marijuana. How are the feds going to handle it? They're not saying. The DEA won't comment on new challenges or new tactics. A spokesperson says simply they'll continue to aggressively enforce federal law and investigate drug trafficking. Lieutenant Brogan's team has already seen post-election changes, with more growers moving into Washington this winter and spring.
The criminal drug trafficking organizations believe that there'll be less pressure from law enforcement in Washington state now that personal use marijuana has been legalized.
And Lieutenant Brogan flatly says that assumption is wrong. His federally funded program, which gets tremendous help from local law enforcement agencies and other state agencies, remains in place and active. As for the possibility of more drug-linked violence in this state, he says, in a way, we are already seeing it and have been for years. The per capita murder rate in Yakima County, much of it tied to drugs, is the highest in the state and more than 4 times the rate of King County. We just don't hear about it much or, frankly, report on it much west of the mountains.